nobody remembers the names of the workers who built them. No blueprints survived, no manuals, no explanations. Yet across the ancient world, enormous structures still stand in places where modern engineers struggle to build, even with machines, satellites, and steel. Entire cities were carved into mountains. Multi-ton stones were lifted onto cliffs without cranes. Underground chambers remained perfectly dry for thousands of years, while modern concrete nearby cracks within decades. Archaeologists can measure these structures, scan them, even recreate parts of them digitally, but many of the methods behind them remain uncertain. The strangest part is not that ancient civilizations built incredible things. It is that some of them built things we still cannot fully explain. And every time a forgotten site is uncovered beneath sand, jungle, or ice, the same question returns. How much knowledge disappeared before history was ever written down? One of the heaviest stones ever lifted in prehistoric Europe is sitting inside Menga Dolmen. The roof block alone weighs close to 180 tons. That is heavier than a modern blue whale skeleton or a fully loaded passenger aircraft engine system. The people who moved it lived more than 5,000 years ago. They had no steel tools, no cranes, no hydraulic systems, and no advanced wheeled transport. Yet the monument still stands almost intact today. Nothing about Menga Dolmen fits the normal image of Neolithic Europe. Archaeology traditionally describes the Iberian communities around 3700 BCE as early farming societies with limited technology. But Menga looks less like a primitive tomb and more like a massive engineering project requiring planning, surveying, structural knowledge, and large-scale labour coordination. The monument lies near Antequera in southern Spain. From the outside it appears simple, almost hidden beneath a grassy mound. Inside, the scale changes completely. The chamber stretches roughly 27 metres long and nearly 6 metres high in some sections. Giant upright stones support enormous roof slabs positioned with remarkable balance. Several of those stones rank among the largest ever used in European megalithic architecture. The first mystery is transportation. Geological studies show that many stones were quarried kilometres away from the site. Moving blocks weighing more than 100 tons across uneven terrain without modern machinery is an enormous challenge even today. Experimental archaeologists have recreated ancient transport methods using ropes, wooden rollers, sledges, and large teams of workers. Those methods can move smaller megaliths successfully, but Menga exists on a completely different scale. As weight increases, friction and instability increase dramatically. A single shift in balance could crack the stone instantly or collapse the transport system beneath it. Researchers estimate that moving the largest blocks may have required hundreds of synchronized workers operating with near-perfect coordination. Some theories suggest giant earth ramps and timber frameworks were used, but no definitive evidence of those systems survives. The lifting process may be even harder to explain. Raising stones weighing dozens or even hundreds of tons into position without cranes would require precise control over pressure and balance. Archaeologists believe the builders likely elevated the stones, gradually using packed earth, timber supports, and incremental lifting techniques. But no reconstruction has fully demonstrated how prehistoric communities could place roof slabs this massive with the level of accuracy visible at Menga. Inside the chamber, another unusual feature appears. 3 central pillars stand beneath the roof stones, distributing the immense weight more evenly across the structure. Modern structural analysis shows the design is surprisingly efficient. Instead of concentrating pressure on weak points, the monument redirects the load through carefully balanced support systems into the ground below. That level of engineering becomes even more surprising considering the monument's age. Menga predates classical Greece by more than 2,000 years and was already ancient before the Roman Empire even existed. Yet its builders understood practical principles of stone stability and load distribution well enough to create a structure capable of surviving for over 5 millennia. The orientation of the monument creates another major archaeological mystery. Most prehistoric European monuments align with astronomical events such as solstices or lunar cycles. Menga does something very different. Its entrance points almost directly toward Peña de los Enamorados, a massive mountain formation shaped like the profile of a human face lying across the landscape. This is highly unusual in European megalithic architecture. Researchers believe the mountain itself may have been sacred to the builders. Instead of focusing on the sky, the monument appears connected to the surrounding landscape. Archaeologists later discovered prehistoric cave art within the mountain, strengthening the theory that the area already held ritual importance long before the dolmen was built. Some experts now argue that Menga was not simply a burial chamber, but part of a larger ceremonial system linking stone, landscape, death, and ancestry together. If true, it would represent one of the earliest examples of monumental landscape planning in prehistoric Europe. Another mystery lies beneath the floor of the chamber itself. Archaeologists discovered a deep vertical shaft extending nearly 20 meters underground. Most European dolmens contain only burial spaces, making this feature extremely rare. Digging that deeply through hard rock using only stone tools would have required enormous effort and technical control. Researchers still debate its purpose. Some believe it was linked to groundwater or ritual purification ceremonies. Others think it symbolized a connection to the underworld or ancestral spirits beneath the earth. Whatever its purpose, the engineering challenge alone is astonishing. Workers would have needed to prevent collapse, remove debris, and maintain stability while excavating downward through dense geological material. The monument also raises major questions about prehistoric society itself. Constructing Menga likely required hundreds of workers over many years. Quarry operations, food supplies, transport systems, and coordinated labour all had to function together. Yet the communities responsible were not large empires like Egypt or Mesopotamia. They were supposedly small agricultural societies without centralized governments. That contradiction has become increasingly important in archaeology. Older theories claimed monumental engineering only appeared after the rise of powerful states and organized bureaucracies. Menga challenges that idea directly. It suggests prehistoric societies may have been far more organized and technically capable than historians once believed. The survival of the monument adds even more mystery. Over 5,000 years, Menga endured erosion, climate changes, and seismic activity, while much younger structures collapsed long ago. Modern laser scans reveal subtle positioning adjustments in the stones that help redirect gravitational pressure and increase long-term stability. Archaeologists can analyze the stones, calculate the weight, and estimate the labor force, but they still cannot fully explain how Neolithic builders achieved this level of engineering with the tools officially available to them. Every theory eventually reaches the same conclusion. The monument appears far too advanced for what conventional history expects from prehistoric Europe. That is why Menga Dolmen remains one of the most unsettling archaeological sites in Europe. The mystery is not whether humans built it. The mystery is how a society from the Stone Age managed to create something so massive, so stable, and so technically sophisticated that even today, thousands of years later, modern researchers are still struggling to fully understand it. Chan Chan should never have existed. A massive city made almost entirely from mud was built beside one of the driest coastlines on Earth, in an environment where even modern agriculture struggles without artificial irrigation. Yet beginning around the 9th century, the Chimu civilization transformed this desert landscape on the northern coast of Peru into the largest adobe city ever constructed in human history. At its peak, Chan Chan covered nearly 20 square kilometers and may have supported more than 60,000 people. From above, the city looks less like an ancient settlement and more like a gigantic engineered complex. Huge rectangular compounds divide the landscape into carefully organized sectors, connected through narrow corridors and ceremonial plazas. But the deeper archaeologists studied the site, the more impossible it began to look. The greatest mystery surrounding Chan Chan is water. The region receives almost no regular rainfall. Some nearby areas average less than 5 millimeters of rain annually. Without irrigation, sustaining a large population here should have been impossible. Yet archaeological evidence shows the Chimu maintained extensive agriculture, capable of feeding tens of thousands of people for centuries. To achieve this, they constructed enormous canal systems carrying water from rivers flowing down from the Andes Mountains. Some canals stretch for dozens of kilometers across unstable desert terrain before reaching agricultural zones around the city. Maintaining water flow over such distances required extremely precise engineering. If the slope became too steep, erosion would destroy the canal walls. Too shallow, and the water would stop moving entirely. Modern engineers studying surviving sections found evidence of controlled gradients and long-term modifications, suggesting the Chimu continuously adjusted the system over generations. This was not primitive irrigation. It was large-scale hydraulic engineering operating in one of the harshest environments in South America. But moving water was only part of the problem. The real mystery is how the city survived water at all. Chan Chan was built primarily from adobe bricks made of mud mixed with organic fibers. Under normal conditions, adobe structures can last in dry climates, but northern Peru is periodically devastated by El Niño events, powerful climate disruptions that bring catastrophic flooding to the desert coast. Geological evidence proves several major El Niño episodes struck the region during the Chimu period. Sediment layers inside parts of the city show that severe flooding repeatedly damaged Chan Chan. In theory, these storms should have destroyed large sections permanently. Yet many walls survived for more than 600 years. This durability continues to confuse archaeologists and conservation scientists. Material analysis revealed that Chimu adobe was not uniform. Different sectors of the city used different clay mixtures depending on structural purpose. Some walls contained denser mineral compositions believed to improve resistance against moisture and cracking. Certain foundations were also unusually thick, helping structures survive earthquakes along the Pacific coast. What makes this even stranger is that some original Chimu walls have proven more durable than modern restoration attempts. In several areas, 20th century repairs deteriorated faster than the ancient adobe beside them. This has led some researchers to believe the Chimu possess sophisticated empirical knowledge of soil composition and environmental engineering that is still not fully understood today. The size of the walls creates another major puzzle. Many compounds inside Chan Chan were surrounded by walls reaching 9 to 12 meters high and extending for hundreds of meters. Constructing structures of this scale using wet adobe should have caused collapse before the material fully dried. The lower layers would have struggled to support the immense weight above them. Archaeologists believe the Chimu may have built walls gradually in thin horizontal stages, allowing sections to dry over time. Others suggest temporary reinforcement systems using reeds or wooden supports. But almost no direct evidence survived because organic materials decomposed centuries ago. The result is a strange situation where one of the largest earthen cities in world history still lacks a complete explanation for how its monumental architecture was physically constructed. The surfaces of Chan Chan add another layer of mystery. Many walls are covered with repetitive carvings of fish, pelicans, waves, and geometric patterns stretching across enormous distances with remarkable consistency. Maintaining nearly identical proportions without modern measuring systems suggests a high level of planning and standardization. Marine imagery dominates the city because the Chimu economy depended heavily on the Pacific Ocean. Historical evidence suggests they controlled extensive fishing networks and maritime trade routes along the coast. For the Chimu, the ocean was not only a source of food but also a symbol of political and religious power. Beneath these artistic patterns, archaeologists uncovered evidence of an extremely controlled society. Chan Chan was divided into giant enclosed compounds called ciudadelas. Each functioned almost like a separate administrative city containing elite residences, storage rooms, ceremonial plazas, and restricted passageways. Access through many corridors was tightly controlled, suggesting strong social hierarchy and centralized authority. Excavations also revealed enormous storage systems capable of holding large quantities of tribute goods such as maize, dried fish, ceramics, textiles, and valuable materials collected from across the Chimu Empire. This was not a loose tribal settlement. It was a highly organized state operating on massive scale. Then archaeologists uncovered one of the darkest discoveries ever associated with the ancient Americas. Near Chan Chan, at a site called Huanchaquito Las Lamas, researchers discovered the remains of more than 140 sacrificed children, alongside over 200 juvenile llamas. The event dates to around the 15th century during the final decades of the Chimu civilization. The evidence was disturbing. Many skeletons showed cut marks across the chest, suggesting ritual sacrifice. Footprints preserved in ancient mud indicated that groups of children and animals were led toward the site during wet conditions, likely caused by severe flooding. Most researchers believe the sacrifice was connected to an extreme El Niño event that devastated the Chimu world. Their civilization depended completely on carefully balanced water systems. Too little water caused famine. Too much water destroyed canals, agriculture, and adobe architecture simultaneously. This may explain why Chan Chan feels different from many ancient cities. It was not simply a ceremonial center or royal capital. It was a civilization constantly fighting against environmental collapse. Ironically, despite its size and sophistication, the Chimu Empire fell rapidly to the Inca around 1470. Some historians believe the Inca did not need to destroy Chan Chan directly. Instead, they may have targeted the irrigation system supplying the city. In a desert empire built entirely around hydraulic engineering, controlling water meant controlling survival itself. After the Spanish conquest, much of Chimu knowledge disappeared permanently. Unlike civilizations such as the Maya, the Chimu left behind no complete writing system explaining how their society functioned. Most of what is known today comes entirely from archaeology. Canals, walls, ceramics, storage rooms, and skeletal remains buried beneath the desert sand. That silence may be the greatest mystery of all. A civilization capable of constructing one of the largest adobe cities in history somehow vanished, while leaving almost no direct explanation behind. Even with modern satellite imaging, engineering analysis, and archaeological reconstruction, researchers still cannot fully explain how Chan Chan was built, maintained, and sustained for centuries in an environment where it should never have survived in the first place. But the people responsible were the Chanka, a civilization that left behind almost no written history, no surviving technical records, and no detailed explanation of how they transformed one of the harshest mountain environments in South America into a massive high-altitude complex now known as Sondor. The site stands more than 3,200 meters above sea level in Peru's Apurimac region near Andahuaylas. Even today, reaching the ruins requires navigating steep mountain terrain, where landslides, unstable slopes, and thin air make large-scale construction extremely difficult. Yet long before steel tools, engines, or modern transport systems existed in the Andes, the builders of Sondor reshaped the summit itself. Archaeologists studying the site have identified artificially leveled sectors, defensive terraces, ceremonial platforms, stair systems, and retaining walls integrated directly into the mountain ridge. The engineering challenge was enormous. Large portions of the original terrain had to be excavated, stabilized, and reinforced in an active seismic zone where earthquakes regularly damage modern structures. The most disturbing question surrounding Sondor is simple. How did the Chanka manage to flatten part of a mountain with the technology available at the time? Geological studies show the ridge contains hard Andean rock formations that are extremely resistant to erosion and manual shaping. Modern excavation in similar terrain requires heavy drilling equipment, cutting machinery, and reinforced stabilization systems. But the Chanka had no iron industry comparable to later industrial civilizations. Archaeological evidence across pre-Columbian Peru suggests they mainly relied on stone hammers, bronze tools, abrasion techniques, and controlled fracturing methods. Despite those limitations, portions of Sondor display surfaces unusually level for high-altitude mountain construction. Several terraces appear deliberately cut into the slope rather than naturally adapted from existing terrain. This is where Sondor begins to separate itself from ordinary archaeological sites. Many ancient cities were built on mountains. Sondor looks more like the mountain was partially redesigned to support the city. The retaining systems are equally difficult to ignore. The Andes sit along the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Peru experiences frequent earthquakes capable of destabilizing entire hillsides. Modern engineers use reinforced foundations, steel anchoring systems, and deep geological surveys before constructing on steep mountain slopes. Yet several sectors of Sondor have survived centuries of seismic activity, using little more than carefully positioned stone. Researchers believe the Chanka builders understood something fundamental about pressure distribution and slope stabilization. Many walls were constructed using dry stone techniques, meaning no mortar was used to bind the stones together. Instead, individual rocks were positioned to absorb and redistribute stress. During seismic movement, the structures could shift slightly without collapsing completely. Similar principles later appeared in major Inca sites such as Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo, but Sondor predates the height of Inca imperial architecture. Some archaeologists now argue that engineering traditions often credited entirely to the Inca may actually have evolved from earlier Andean cultures, including the Chanka. The location itself raises another problem. Sondor was built in an isolated position where transporting construction material would have been extremely dangerous. Some walls stand near abrupt drops with almost no margin for error. Every stone had to be moved uphill through rugged terrain without wheeled vehicles or large domesticated transport animals comparable to horses or oxen. The Inca road system did not yet dominate the region during the early Chanka period, meaning logistics depended heavily on manpower. At high altitude, even basic physical labour becomes significantly more exhausting because oxygen levels decrease as elevation rises. Modern physiological studies show that reduced oxygen directly affects endurance, recovery time, and carrying capacity. Yet the Chanka still managed to build a multi-level complex across unstable mountain terrain. Water management may be even more impressive. Mountain fortresses face a constant contradiction. High elevations offer strategic visibility and defense, but reliable water control becomes extremely difficult. During dry seasons, water scarcity threatens long-term occupation. During rainy seasons, uncontrolled runoff can destroy terraces and trigger catastrophic erosion. Archaeologists working at Sondor have identified traces of drainage alignments and possible hydraulic control features built into sections of the site. If these systems originally functioned as intended, they required advanced understanding of seasonal rainfall behavior and mountain hydrology. One failed drainage channel could destabilize an entire slope, and yet major portions of the terrace system remain intact hundreds of years after abandonment. At the centre of Sondor lies one of its most mysterious structures, a raised ceremonial platform commonly identified as an Ushnu. Similar ritual platforms appear across several Andean civilizations and are often associated with political authority, religious ceremonies, and astronomical observation. The structure at Sondor overlooks surrounding sectors from an elevated position, suggesting it served as the symbolic centre of the complex. Some researchers believe the platform may have been aligned intentionally with celestial events. Across the Andes, ancient cultures closely monitored solar movement for agricultural and ceremonial purposes. In places like Machu Picchu and Chanquillo, architectural alignments connected structures to solstices, equinoxes, or seasonal cycles. Preliminary studies at Sondor suggest certain sightlines may correspond with solar positioning during specific times of the year. But because the Chanca left behind no decipherable written system, archaeologists cannot fully determine whether these alignments were deliberate astronomical calculations or simply consequences of the surrounding topography. That uncertainty defines almost every part of Sondor. The Chanca civilization itself remains partly hidden behind the shadow of the Inca Empire. Spanish chroniclers describe the Chanca as one of the greatest military threats the Inca ever faced. According to historical accounts, the Chanca nearly destroyed Cusco before being defeated by the future Emperor Pachacuti during the 15th century. That victory transformed the Inca from a regional power into an expanding empire. But after the Chanca defeat, much of their identity was gradually absorbed, rewritten, or erased. Unlike the Maya, they left no large surviving body of inscriptions. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, there are no detailed technical texts explaining construction methods, political systems, or engineering knowledge. What survives instead are mountain ruins like Sondor, and those ruins suggest a civilization far more sophisticated than historical records usually acknowledge. The layout of the site indicates that Sondor was not purely military. Defensive corridors exist throughout the complex, but ceremonial sectors occupy some of the highest and most visually dominant positions. This combination has led archaeologists to believe the mountain may have served both strategic and sacred purposes simultaneously. In Andean belief systems, mountains were often viewed as living spiritual entities connected to weather, fertility, and divine power. These sacred mountains, known as apus, played central roles in religious life. Constructing monumental architecture directly into a mountain ridge may therefore have represented more than engineering. It may have symbolized political control fused with spiritual authority. Far beyond the Nile Valley, buried deep inside Egypt's western desert, lies a place that should never have supported civilization for long. Dakhla Oasis sits more than 350 kilometers from the Nile, surrounded by one of the driest landscapes on Earth. Modern temperatures in the region regularly climb above 45 degrees Celsius during summer, while annual rainfall is often measured in mere millimeters. Yet archaeological evidence shows that human communities survived here continuously for thousands of years, constructing cities, temples, irrigation systems, cemeteries, and trade routes in a place that appears fundamentally hostile to permanent life. What makes Dakhla Oasis truly mysterious is not a single monument or artifact, but the scale of engineering adaptation hidden beneath the desert itself. The oasis first drew major archaeological attention during surveys conducted in the 19th and 20th centuries, but the real significance of the region only became clear after systematic excavations by institutions such as the Dakhla Oasis Project, launched in the late 1970s. Archaeologists soon realized that the oasis preserved evidence from multiple eras layered on top of each other, including the Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Roman occupation, early Christianity, and Islamic settlement periods. Sites such as Kelis, Balat, and Deir el-Hagar reveal that Dakhla had once been far more than an isolated desert refuge. It functioned as a fully connected civilization hub deep inside the Sahara. One of the greatest mysteries of Dakhla Oasis is how ancient populations managed water in an environment where rain was nearly non-existent. Today, scientists know the oasis depends heavily on the Nubian sandstone aquifer system, one of the world's largest underground freshwater reserves, stretching beneath parts of Egypt, Libya, Chad, and Sudan. Some of the water stored within the aquifer fell as rain tens of thousands of years ago during wetter climatic periods. What archaeologists still struggle to explain is how ancient engineers located and exploited these underground sources with such precision long before modern geology existed. Excavations have uncovered ancient wells reaching impressive depths, along with evidence of complex irrigation systems designed to maximize every available drop of water. In some locations, Roman-era hydraulic technology appears surprisingly advanced for such a remote region. Channels were carefully angled to maintain water flow across agricultural fields without causing rapid evaporation. Certain wells continued functioning for centuries despite constant exposure to sand intrusion and extreme temperature variation. Researchers from geological studies conducted in the Western Desert have noted that some ancient water extraction points align remarkably well with highly productive underground reservoirs identified only through modern hydrological mapping. Whether this knowledge came from generations of environmental observation or from techniques now lost remains unclear. Equally mysterious is the survival of Dakhla's architecture itself. Across the oasis, archaeologists discovered settlements built primarily from mud brick, a material normally associated with fragility and erosion. In theory, mud brick structures should deteriorate rapidly under harsh environmental stress. Extreme daytime heat followed by cold desert nights creates constant cycles of thermal expansion and contraction capable of cracking weak construction material within decades. Yet many structures in Dakhla remain standing for more than 1,000 years, while some foundations date back nearly 4,000 years. At sites like Balat, researchers identified administrative buildings from Egypt's Old Kingdom, constructed with remarkable precision using locally produced mud brick. Laboratory analysis revealed that ancient builders carefully controlled the ratio of clay, silt, straw, and mineral content within each brick. Some samples appear to contain unusually high salt and gypsum concentrations that may have increased durability. Archaeologists also noticed that wall thicknesses were optimized for thermal insulation, allowing interior temperatures to remain significantly cooler than the outside environment. Modern desert architecture still uses similar principles, but the sophistication of these ancient systems raises major questions about how much environmental engineering knowledge existed in isolated desert communities thousands of years ago. The city of Kelis presents another extraordinary archaeological mystery. Buried beneath desert sands for centuries, Kelis emerged as one of the most important discoveries in Roman Egypt. Unlike monumental sites focused mainly on temples or royal tombs, Kelis preserves something much rarer: everyday life. Archaeologists uncovered thousands of written documents, including letters, contracts, tax records, school exercises, and religious texts written in Greek, Coptic, and other ancient languages. The dry climate preserved ink and papyrus with astonishing clarity. These texts revealed that Kelis was not a poor desert outpost struggling for survival. It possessed organized agriculture, active trade networks, textile production, and connections extending across the Roman Empire. Imported ceramics, glassware, and luxury goods discovered at the site demonstrate that caravans regularly crossed enormous desert distances, carrying valuable materials into regions that appear almost inaccessible even today. Some trade routes linked Dakhla with the Nile Valley, while others extended westward toward Libya and deeper into trans-Saharan networks. This raises one of the oasis's greatest logistical mysteries. Crossing the Sahara without modern navigation is extraordinarily dangerous. Temperatures can become lethal, landmarks constantly shift under wind-driven sand movement, and water sources are separated by hundreds of kilometers. Yet ancient caravan systems managed to move food, wine, pottery, textiles, and possibly precious minerals across these deserts with remarkable consistency. Archaeologists have identified ancient road traces and caravan stations, but the precise navigation methods used by traders remain debated. Some researchers believe desert travelers relied heavily on astronomical positioning, while others argue that accumulated environmental memory passed through generations allowed caravans to recognize subtle terrain patterns invisible to outsiders. Another major mystery surrounding Dakhla Oasis involves climate history. Geological and paleo-environmental evidence indicates that the Sahara was not always the hyper-arid desert seen today. Thousands of years ago, much of North Africa experienced wetter conditions during what scientists call the African humid period. Fossil remains, ancient lake beds, pollen records, and sediment analysis suggest that regions now covered by sand once supported grasslands, wildlife, and seasonal lakes. The transition from green landscape to extreme desert dramatically altered human survival across the region. Dakhla Oasis may represent one of the clearest examples of long-term human adaptation to climate collapse. Archaeological layers show shifting settlement patterns as water availability changed over centuries. Some communities disappeared entirely, while others reorganized around increasingly sophisticated water management systems. Researchers studying ancient climate records argue that Dakhla offers valuable insight into how civilizations respond to environmental instability, resource scarcity, and desertification. The oasis also contains deeply unusual burial sites and naturally preserved human remains. Unlike the elaborate royal mummification associated with the Nile Valley, many bodies discovered in Dakhla underwent partial or entirely natural preservation caused by the desert environment itself. Extremely low humidity rapidly removed moisture from corpses before decomposition could fully occur. Some burials preserved hair, skin, textiles, and even internal biological material after nearly 2,000 years. These remains became scientifically important for another reason. Bioarchaeologists studying skeletons and tissue samples found evidence of diseases including tuberculosis, nutritional deficiencies, and parasitic infections. Ancient DNA analysis has also provided clues about migration and population movement between the Nile Valley and remote desert communities. In some cemeteries, researchers discovered burial practices blending Egyptian, Roman, and early Christian traditions together, showing how multiple civilizations overlapped within the oasis over time. Religious transformation in Dakhla is itself surrounded by archaeological intrigue. Temples dedicated to Egyptian gods continued functioning during the Roman occupation, while Christianity later spread through the region with surprising strength. Excavations uncovered churches, monasteries, and Christian manuscripts deep within areas once dominated by pharaonic traditions. This coexistence of belief systems suggests that the oasis remained culturally connected to broader Mediterranean civilization despite its isolation. Stone walls climb a mountain ridge in the Peruvian Andes where the wind never fully stops. At more than 3,200 meters above sea level, Sondor appears less like a ruined city and more like a section of the mountain itself, reshaped by human hands. Archaeologists identify the site as one of the most important ceremonial and defensive centers associated with the Chanca civilization, a powerful culture that challenged the rising Inca Empire during the 15th century. Yet despite its historical importance, Sondor remains one of the least understood ancient sites in South America. Unlike Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuaman, it receives relatively little global attention, even though several of its engineering features continue to raise difficult archaeological questions. The mystery is not simply who built Sondor. The greater mystery is how a civilization with limited metallurgy and no wheeled transport transformed an isolated mountain summit into a fortified ceremonial complex capable of surviving centuries of earthquakes, erosion, and violent Andean weather. The ruins are located in the Apurimac region of Peru near the modern city of Andahuaylas. The site occupies a strategic mountain ridge surrounded by steep valleys and rugged terrain. From the summit, visibility stretches across large sections of the surrounding landscape, allowing control over important movement routes through the Andes. Archaeological surveys suggest the site expanded between the 12th and 15th centuries during the rise of the Chanca people. Spanish chroniclers later described the Chanca as fierce warriors who nearly destroyed the Inca state before ultimately being defeated by Pachacuti. Much of Chanca history disappeared after that defeat, leaving only fragments recorded by Inca and Spanish sources. Because the Chanca left no surviving written system comparable to alphabetic scripts, sites like Sondor have become some of the only remaining evidence of their technological and cultural capabilities. One of the greatest mysteries at Sondor involves the mountain itself. Large portions of the summit were artificially flattened to create ceremonial plazas, defensive terraces, and elevated platforms. Modern visitors often underestimate the difficulty of this transformation because erosion has softened some edges over time. But geological studies of the ridge show that builders were working directly against hard volcanic and sedimentary rock formations typical of the Andes. Even with modern machinery, reshaping mountain terrain at high altitude is an enormous logistical challenge. The labour required would have involved cutting stone, removing debris, stabilising slopes, and constructing retaining systems capable of preventing collapse during seasonal rains and earthquakes. Archaeologists estimate that thousands of cubic meters of material may have been displaced during the creation of the ceremonial sectors alone. What makes the engineering even more difficult to explain is the absence of advanced metal tools. The Chanca operated before large-scale iron technology in the Andes. Most known Andean civilizations relied primarily on stone tools, bronze implements, hammer stones, and abrasion techniques for shaping rock. Yet parts of Sondor display unusually level surfaces and carefully stabilized terraces that suggest long-term planning rather than simple expansion over time. Several retaining walls follow the natural mountain contours with surprising precision. Similar engineering principles appear at major Inca sites, but Sondor predates the peak of Inca imperial architecture. This has led some researchers to argue that many techniques commonly associated with the Inca may have deeper regional origins tied to earlier Andean cultures such as the Chanca. The defensive design of Sondor is another major archaeological puzzle. The site was constructed on terrain so steep that transporting construction materials alone would have been extremely dangerous. Many walls stand beside sharp drops where a single mistake could have been fatal. Despite this, the builders created interconnected stairways, narrow defensive corridors, elevated observation points, and stone platforms integrated directly into the mountainside. Some terraces remain stable after centuries of seismic activity in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on Earth. Peru sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic activity regularly generates destructive earthquakes. Modern engineering in the Andes requires deep structural reinforcement to resist slope failures. Yet many of Sondor's stone walls survived using techniques developed hundreds of years before modern structural geology existed. Researchers studying ancient Andean construction often point to the importance of dry stone masonry, where stones are carefully fitted together without mortar. While Sondor does not contain the massive polygonal stone blocks seen at Sacsayhuaman, several sectors demonstrate impressive stabilization methods. Stones were arranged to distribute pressure across uneven terrain while allowing slight movement during seismic events. This flexibility reduced catastrophic cracking. Similar principles are now recognized in earthquake-resistant engineering. The precision was not perfect in a modern sense, but it was sophisticated enough to survive in a hostile geological environment where many later colonial structures collapsed. Water management may represent an even greater mystery. High-altitude mountain sites constantly struggle with erosion, rainfall runoff, and seasonal water shortages. Archaeologists believe Sondor once included hydraulic features designed to redirect water away from ceremonial and residential areas. Traces of channels and drainage alignments remain visible in some sectors. If these systems functioned effectively, they would have required careful understanding of slope dynamics and seasonal rainfall patterns. Even minor miscalculations could have triggered landslides capable of destroying terraces and walls. The Andes experience intense seasonal contrasts, with heavy rains capable of rapidly eroding exposed surfaces. Yet portions of Sondor's terraces remain remarkably intact centuries after abandonment. At the centre of the site stands one of its most enigmatic structures, often identified as an ushnu, a ceremonial platform associated with ritual and political authority in Andean cultures. Elevated above surrounding sectors, the structure appears positioned to dominate both the physical landscape and ritual activities below. Some archaeologists argue that its orientation may contain astronomical significance. In many Andean civilizations, architecture was linked to solar cycles, mountain alignments, and celestial observation. Certain sightlines at Sondor appear to correspond with seasonal solar positions, though the evidence remains debated. The problem is that without written records from the Chanka themselves, archaeologists cannot fully reconstruct the symbolic meaning of the site. This uncertainty has fueled ongoing speculation about the true purpose of Sondor. Was it primarily a fortress, a ceremonial centre, a political capital, or all three simultaneously? The layout suggests multiple functions. Defensive corridors imply military concerns, while ceremonial platforms point towards religious significance. Some historians believe the Chanka intentionally built Sondor on a dramatic mountain ridge, because elevation itself carried sacred meaning in Andean cosmology. Mountains, known as apus in Andean belief systems, were often viewed as powerful spiritual entities connected to weather, fertility, and divine authority. Constructing monumental architecture directly into a mountain may therefore have represented both political control and sacred integration with the landscape. Another major mystery surrounding Sondor is how little survives from the Chanka civilization despite their historical importance. According to colonial-era chronicles, the Chanka nearly defeated the Inca before Pachacuti reorganized the Inca state into a militarized empire. Some accounts describe massive battles involving tens of thousands of warriors. After the Chanka defeat, many settlements were absorbed into the expanding Inca system. In some cases, earlier structures were modified or repurposed. This means archaeologists studying Sondor face a difficult challenge: separating original Chanka features from later Inca influence. The destruction of indigenous records during the Spanish conquest only deepened this historical void. Modern archaeological work at Sondor has revealed evidence of long-term occupation, ceremonial activity, and strategic planning, but many questions remain unresolved. Excavations have uncovered ceramics, defensive structures, and ritual spaces, yet no discovery has fully explained the site's engineering complexity. The logistical challenge alone is staggering. Every stone, tool, and resource had to be transported through mountainous terrain without modern roads, cranes, or wheeled vehicles. High-altitude labour also places severe stress on the human body due to lower oxygen levels. Even today, large-scale construction projects in the Andes require specialised planning and machinery. Ancient builders achieved monumental results using manpower, local materials, and accumulated environmental knowledge passed through generations. Kelis is not one of the famous ancient cities people instantly recognise. There are no giant pyramids towering above the desert, no colossal statues carved into cliffs, and no legends of lost gold hidden beneath its ruins. Yet for archaeologists, Kelis may be one of the most disturbing archaeological discoveries ever uncovered in Roman Egypt. Because unlike many ancient cities that survived only as fragments of stone, Kelis preserved something far more dangerous to history: evidence of ordinary human life almost completely frozen in time. The ancient city lies deep inside Egypt's Dakhla oasis, more than 700 kilometers southwest of Cairo, surrounded by one of the harshest desert environments on Earth. Today the site is officially known as Ismant el Karab, but in antiquity it was called Kelis. The city flourished primarily between the 1st and 4th centuries AD during Roman control of Egypt. For centuries, shifting sands buried much of the settlement, hiding its streets, houses, temples and documents beneath layers of desert sediment. Modern excavation campaigns beginning in the late 20th century revealed something archaeologists rarely encounter in the ancient world: an almost intact record of daily civilization preserved not by technology but by extreme aridity. What makes Kelis extraordinary is not simply the survival of ruins. Entire neighbourhoods built mostly from mud brick remained standing after nearly 2,000 years. In most climates, mud brick architecture disintegrates rapidly once abandoned. Rainwater, moisture, plant growth, and temperature fluctuations usually reduce such cities to shapeless mounds within centuries. Yet at Kelis, walls several metres high still stand. Doorways remain visible, staircases survive. Interior rooms can still be identified. Some houses even preserve traces of plaster coatings and pigments. Archaeologists studying the site discovered that certain structures resisted erosion far better than expected for sun-dried mud brick construction. This created one of the first major mysteries surrounding Kelis. Ancient builders in the oasis appear to have understood methods of thermal control and structural stabilization far beyond what most people associate with desert settlements of the Roman era. The walls were often exceptionally thick, sometimes exceeding 1 metre in width. Streets were narrow, minimizing direct solar exposure. Many homes contained central courtyards that promoted passive airflow. Researchers comparing temperatures inside reconstructed mud brick environments found that thick earthen walls could reduce internal temperatures significantly compared to exterior desert heat, functioning almost like natural insulation systems. Modern passive cooling architects in North Africa and the Middle East still use similar principles today. The mystery is not that ancient people understood climate adaptation, but how refined and standardized these techniques became in such an isolated settlement. Some scholars also suspect that the mud brick formula itself may have contributed to the city's survival. Analyses of surviving bricks revealed mixtures containing clay, straw, mineral salts, and organic fibres. Certain samples show unusually high durability against cracking caused by thermal expansion. In the Dakhla oasis, daytime temperatures can exceed 40 degrees Celsius before dropping dramatically at night. Repeated expansion and contraction normally destroy mud brick over long periods, yet many Kelis walls endured for over 15 centuries. Archaeologists still debate whether the builders intentionally engineered the material composition for desert endurance, or whether environmental conditions alone preserved the city. But the true archaeological shock of Kelis was not its architecture. It was the discovery of thousands of ancient written documents preserved almost intact by the desert climate. Papyrus fragments, wooden tablets, letters, legal contracts, tax records, business accounts, school exercises, and religious manuscripts emerged from houses, refuse dumps, and abandoned rooms across the city. In humid regions, organic writing materials rarely survive more than a few centuries. At Kelis, the desert acted like a natural preservation chamber. The result was one of the most detailed archives of ordinary life ever recovered from Roman Egypt. For historians, this transformed Kelis into something far more valuable than a ruined settlement. It became a direct window into the mechanics of an ancient society. Archaeologists could suddenly reconstruct trade systems, food distribution, family relationships, education, taxation, and even private emotions through personal correspondence. Some letters discuss grain shipments and debt payments. Others contain complaints about delayed deliveries, requests for clothing, or discussions about illness and travel. Instead of seeing the Roman world only through emperors and monuments, Kelis exposed the routines of ordinary citizens living at the edge of the empire. The city also revealed evidence of a religious movement that almost vanished from human memory. Among the most important discoveries at Kelis were texts connected to Manichaeism, an ancient religion founded in the 3rd century AD by the Persian prophet Mani. At its peak, Manichaeism spread across an enormous geographic range stretching from the Roman Empire to Central Asia and China. Some historians believe it became one of the largest organised religions in the ancient world. Yet within centuries, persecution and political suppression nearly erased it entirely. Very few Manichaean texts survived history. Many were deliberately destroyed, but Kelis preserved one of the largest collections ever discovered. Archaeologists uncovered hymns, prayers, theological writings, and private religious letters belonging to members of the Manichaean community living inside the oasis. These discoveries radically changed scholarly understanding of the religion. Before the Kelis excavations, much of what historians knew about Manichaeism came from hostile outside sources. Suddenly, researchers had direct evidence written by believers themselves. This created another mystery. Why did such a remote desert settlement become a significant centre for a religion that spread across continents? Some scholars suggest the oasis trade routes allowed ideas to move through the desert more efficiently than historians once believed. Others believe isolated communities like Kelis offered protection for minority religious groups escaping imperial pressure. The city's position in the western desert may have made it both connected and hidden at the same time. The trade networks themselves remain another unresolved puzzle. Kelis survived in an environment that appears almost uninhabitable. The settlement depended on groundwater extraction, caravan transport and oasis agriculture far from the Nile River. Yet archaeological evidence indicates sustained economic activity for centuries. Pottery from different regions, imported goods, and administrative records show the city maintained connections with broader Roman Egypt. Satellite imaging and desert surveys have identified traces of ancient caravan routes crossing areas now considered nearly impossible to traverse without modern navigation. Transporting supplies through such terrain would have required advanced logistical coordination. Water management was especially critical. Even small disruptions in oasis hydrology could threaten the survival of the entire settlement. Archaeologists discovered evidence of wells, irrigation systems, and agricultural planning adapted to the fragile desert environment. Some researchers argue that Roman-era oasis settlements like Kelis possessed more sophisticated environmental management systems than previously assumed. Yet despite centuries of survival, Kelis eventually disappeared. One of the strangest aspects of the site is the absence of evidence for catastrophic destruction. Many ancient cities show clear signs of warfare, invasion, earthquake collapse, or fire. Kelis does not. Excavations revealed no major burn layers, no mass destruction horizon, and no evidence of sudden military annihilation. Instead, the city appears to have been abandoned gradually during the late 4th century AD. The reason remains uncertain. Climate change may have reduced water availability in the oasis. Economic instability during the later Roman Empire could have weakened desert trade systems. Political changes and shifting religious dynamics may also have contributed. Some historians suggest regional trade routes simply collapsed, isolating the settlement beyond recovery. But no single explanation fully accounts for the abandonment. Kelis did not die violently. It faded slowly into the desert until the sands erased it from memory. Stone terraces cling to the cliffs of the Taurus Mountains in southern Turkey, more than 1,200 meters above sea level. Wind moves through empty arches where monks once walked 15 centuries ago. Below the monastery, narrow valleys disappear into layers of fog and limestone ridges. The place is called Alahan Monastery, and even today archaeologists still struggle to explain how such a massive religious complex was constructed in terrain this hostile during the 5th century AD. The site appears isolated, almost unreachable, yet the scale of its engineering rivals some of the most ambitious Byzantine religious centres of its era. Historians believe construction began during the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Leo I around the late 5th century and continued into the 6th century under Emperor Zeno, who himself was born in nearby Isauria. But the deeper researchers examine the ruins, the more mysterious the monastery becomes. Alahan was not discovered in the modern sense like a buried Egyptian tomb or a lost jungle city. Local communities in the Taurus Mountains always knew the ruins existed. However, systematic archaeological interest only intensified during the 19th and 20th centuries when European travellers described the monastery as one of the most extraordinary early Christian sites in Anatolia. British archaeologist Michael Gouff later conducted major excavations during the 1950s and 60s, revealing the enormous scale of the complex. What emerged was not a simple mountain monastery. Instead, Alahan appeared to be an immense pilgrimage centre built across dangerous mountain slopes where construction alone should have been nearly impossible. The first mystery begins with location. The monastery stretches across steep cliffs overlooking the Goksu Valley, an area surrounded by fractured limestone formations and unstable terrain. Even with modern roads, transporting heavy stone blocks into the mountains remains difficult today. Yet Byzantine builders somehow hauled thousands of tons of carved limestone onto elevated terraces more than 1,500 years ago. Some columns at the site weigh several tons each. Archaeologists still debate the exact transportation methods used. There is no evidence of advanced wheeled transport infrastructure leading directly to the monastery. Pack animals alone would not have been enough for many of the larger architectural elements. Some researchers believe temporary wooden ramps and pulley systems were constructed along the mountain face, but no physical traces survive. The engineering problem becomes even more serious when examining the precision of the stonework itself. Many surviving walls show remarkably tight stone joints with minimal mortar gaps. Decorative carvings around windows and arches remain geometrically balanced despite centuries of earthquakes and erosion. Several architectural historians have compared the masonry quality at Alahan to elite urban Byzantine construction, rather than a remote provincial monastery. This creates a major contradiction. The region surrounding Alahan was mountainous and sparsely populated during late antiquity. Producing craftsmanship of this level would have required highly trained masons, specialized tools, organized labor forces, and enormous financial support. The question is why imperial resources were invested into a monastery hidden deep within the Taurus Mountains. The Western Church at Alahan reveals some of the most sophisticated details. Carved capitals display intricate vine patterns, crosses, birds, and symbolic motifs associated with early Christian theology. Some carvings show stylistic influences from Syria and northern Mesopotamia, while others resemble late Roman decorative traditions. This mixture suggests Alahan was connected to major trade and pilgrimage networks across the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeologists discovered evidence of covered walkways, bathing facilities, monastic housing, ceremonial courtyards, and large cistern systems. The complexity indicates that the site may have accommodated hundreds of travellers and pilgrims rather than a small isolated religious community. One of the greatest archaeological mysteries at Alahan involves water. The monastery was constructed in a dry, mountainous environment where natural freshwater sources were limited. Yet excavations uncovered an elaborate hydraulic system cut directly into the limestone bedrock. Channels collected rainwater from rooftops and terraces before directing it into storage cisterns. Some reservoirs remain partially intact after 15 centuries of exposure to harsh climate conditions. Engineers studying the site noted that several channels were carved with calculated gradients, allowing gravity to maintain controlled water flow without stagnation. The precision required for such hydraulic planning suggests advanced practical knowledge of water management. The durability of the water system is even harder to explain. Seasonal temperature differences in the Taurus Mountains can produce severe expansion and contraction within limestone structures. Repeated freezing and heating cycles normally fracture ancient reservoirs over long periods of time. Yet portions of Alahan's cistern network survived multiple earthquakes and centuries of weathering. Similar hydraulic durability is seen at certain Roman and Nabatean sites, but Alahan stands out because of its isolated mountain environment. Some archaeologists believe Byzantine builders intentionally selected specific limestone densities to reduce cracking. Others argue that the monastery's engineers adapted earlier Roman hydraulic principles that are now poorly documented in surviving texts. Earthquakes present another major mystery. Southern Anatolia lies within a tectonically active region affected by the collision of the Anatolian, Arabian, and African plates. Numerous destructive earthquakes struck the eastern Mediterranean throughout late antiquity and the medieval period. Despite this, substantial sections of Alahan's arches, columns, and structural walls remained standing for more than 1,500 years. Modern structural engineers studying Byzantine architecture observed that some buildings at Alahan appear designed to distribute weight through flexible load paths rather than rigid vertical pressure alone. The builders may have intentionally integrated the natural mountain rock into the structural foundation to reduce seismic stress. If true, it would demonstrate a surprisingly advanced understanding of earthquake-resistant architecture centuries before modern seismic engineering. The monastery's ceremonial pathway may be its most visually mysterious feature. Pilgrims approaching the Eastern Church pass through a long colonnaded route lined with carved stone decoration. The pathway creates a deliberate psychological effect. As visitors moved higher into the complex, mountain cliffs gradually closed around them while the valley disappeared behind the stone arcades. Architectural historians believe this was intentional symbolic design, meant to separate pilgrims from the physical world before entering sacred space. But creating such a route required enormous planning, because the mountain terrain had to be reshaped through excavation and terracing. Even today, parts of the pathway cling dangerously close to steep drops. Religious symbolism at Alahan also raises unanswered questions. Several carvings depict crosses surrounded by solar patterns and geometric motifs, more commonly associated with older regional traditions. Some scholars argue these symbols reflect continuity between pre-Christian Anatolian beliefs and Byzantine Christianity. Others suggest the monastery intentionally absorbed local artistic traditions to attract converts from surrounding mountain communities. Archaeological evidence shows Isauria, the broader region around Alahan, had a reputation in Roman history for rebellion and cultural independence. Building an enormous imperial monastery in this territory may have been partly political, designed to strengthen Byzantine control over isolated populations. The scale of labour required at Alahan remains difficult to calculate. Estimates based on surviving architecture suggest thousands of tons of stone were quarried, shaped, transported, and assembled during construction. Quarry marks found near the monastery indicate that some stone blocks were cut directly from surrounding cliffs, reducing transportation distances. However, many decorative elements appear to have been produced by highly skilled artisans who likely travelled from major Byzantine urban centres. Organising such a workforce in mountainous terrain would have required stable supply routes for food, tools, timber, and water. Historians believe construction may have continued in phases for decades, perhaps even generations. Then there is the mystery of abandonment. By the medieval period, Alahan was largely deserted. Historical records do not provide a precise explanation. several possibilities exist. Arab-Byzantine conflicts destabilized Anatolia during the 7th and 8th centuries. Trade and pilgrimage routes shifted. Earthquakes may have damaged sections of the complex beyond repair. Climate changes could also have affected water access in the mountains. Yet the sudden silence surrounding the monastery remains strange considering its former importance. Unlike Constantinople or major Byzantine cities, Alahan faded into obscurity with remarkably little documentation.